Hey everyone, Sarah here. Welcome back to Never Out of Books. Today I am going to be wrapping up kind of Mayish, June-ish, like somewhere in there. I'm currently participating in Read the Olympics, and that kind of like overlaps the month. It started in the middle of June and it goes into the middle of July, so I'm like hardcore reading for that. You would think there would be a monstrous amount of books in my lap, but there are not. Again, May probably was one of the worst reading months I've had in my entire adult life. And I did not read very much. So this shouldn't be hugely laborious or long. First up, I read How to Be Brave by E. Catherine Kotaris. This is a young adult novel. And this is about Georgia, whose mother dies and quite selfishly leaves her a pretty awful note. I think as a mother, I would never want to leave a note like this to my daughter. But it does encourage her to be brave, which, you know, is a good thing to do. So she makes a list of all the things that she should be more brave about and sets off to achieve them with mixed kind of results. So this is like a healing from death book, which I actually do kind of like sometimes, especially in a time when you're finding yourself anyway as a teenager. I really enjoyed this. This kind of spurred my reading again in a positive direction, which is absolutely wonderful. I appreciated that she was, you know, a bit on the chunky side and had some other things going on that were difficult for her in addition. And it, I believe, ended very pleasingly in some way with some sort of lesson learned, although it was a long time ago that I read this, so I can't remember. But I gave it 4 stars, and I think it is something that I would recommend to people. Next up, I read a short story that I got in a book box a long time ago and forgot was on my shelf, probably because it's this thin. A Wolf to Watch Over Me by Selah Carson. It's the first book or story in the Wolves of Fenrir series. This is kind of a fantasy romance sort of thing. I'm a little shaky in the genres for some of these because it's not something that I generally read. This is set on Earth in a time where there are these wolf shapeshifters, aliens that are known to be around the Earth, and he ends up imprinting on a scientist and having to protect her because something goes wrong. And it's like one day long, you know, it's a pretty short book. But I was actually surprised at how much I enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars and was interested in looking up some of the other parts or little stories in this series because it was like interesting to me, surprisingly. Because again, it's not my genre, but there are certain authors who know how to write a short story, and she is one of them. I think she did a really great job. Finally read one of my NetGalley arcs that I had on there for a very long time, Southern Double Cross by Carolyn Fardig. This is the 3rd book in the Southern B&B Mystery series. This is not my favorite series by her, but I did end up giving this one 4 stars because it settled down a bit, and I finally got in the lay of the land here and am ready to go with it. So this is about technically 2 sisters, although you get only the point of view of Quinn. And they are running the bed and breakfast of their family and get involved in, obviously it's a cozy mystery, so they get involved in some sleuthing. The thing is it's written from Quinn's point of view, but it's really her sister who is actually good at sleuthing. And part of the reason I think I liked this book so much is because they actually admit it at the end of this book, which is a good thing, finally, because she's actually the good one. So it's not written from her perspective, though. So it ends up being a bit more interesting, and it made me appreciate the other 2 books a little bit more as well. And I don't know if there's going to be more in this series. She tends to write like actual complete cozy mysteries and not do continuations that are like 20 books long. She writes, you know, 3, 4, 5 of them and then finishes the character story arc. So we'll see if there's any more. I think this did hit a fairly decent endpoint for everyone, and it was very pleasing to me. Next up, I got caught up with the Paw Enforcement, I'm going to call them humorous mysteries series, and that one is Paw of the Jungle by Diane Kelly. This is book 8, so again, this is not where you would probably start. This follows Megan, who is a police officer, and her canine companion, Bridget, who has a little bit of a say in these books. I enjoy these books. Of course, there's like a little love story involved in them in the overarching storyline. I enjoy also that there is a main mystery, but there's also usually a few other little cases that she has to solve during the book that aren't mentioned on the back, which makes it seem very much more of a police officer-y sort of thing going on here. This one does stolen animals at the zoo is the main mystery here. This series also took me just like a little bit of time to get into overall, but now that I'm hooked, I'm enjoying it more and more as it kind of settles in. I also gave this one 4 stars. Next up, I read Tide and Punishment by Bree Baker. This is the 3rd in the Seaside Cafe mystery. This is also a cozy mystery, and it follows Everly Swan, who lives in North Carolina, and she owns an iced tea shop. These Swan ladies, there's like a mystery surrounding all of them as well, that they are really never allowed to leave the island or bad things happen. They are like the founders of this island, and you know, the reason why it's grown, and there will always be swan women on this island. But her aunts are hilarious. She has 2 aunts that live in town and do all kinds of bee-related items in their shop. This one is actually set around Christmas time, which was very interesting. She gets sucked into mysteries. Like, the first couple books she decided she wants to do this, like she made a firm resolve, and in this one everyone's like, you're sleuthing, and she's like, I'm not really. And I have to say, I side with her. She was not actually sleuthing. She gets sucked into things more than in other books where they say, oh, I was just sucked into this, I couldn't help myself. She really is. But this one, the mayor is found dead, and they have to find out what happened. This has some interesting side characters as well, not just her aunts, but animal characters. We've got the seagull, Lou, and not on here is the cat. The cat also plays a interesting role sometimes during this, and yes, there is a love interest, as there always is. Also a 4-star book. In an effort to do some of my series reading that I was thinking of, I read Once a Rebel by Mary Jo Putney. This is the 2nd book in the Rogues Redeemed series, and this is obviously a historical romance. You do not necessarily need to read all of the books in this series. They stand alone fairly well at this point. Of course, I'm only on book 2, so that could change. So she writes pretty calm romances when it comes right down to it, which is nice every once in a while. And this one was very interesting because it was actually set in the United States during the War of 1812, which is not something that I have learned very much about, to be honest, despite all of my history classes. It's not a war that gets a lot of writing about it. And so that was kind of interesting, and it sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole of research about the events in this, which are accurate. And I enjoyed. Other than that, this was, I don't know, there was something a bit lacking in this one. Can't quite put my finger on it at this second. I gave it 3 stars. It definitely was something that I wanted to read, but maybe compared to the books that I had been reading, it just didn't hold up. But I will be continuing with this series. I had on my Nook a lot from years and years and years ago, Everyone Loves a Hero by Marie Force, and I decided to read it. So Marie Force is also a very well-known author of contemporary romance. I have not read very many of her books, and I have to say, after reading this one, I'm probably not going to be one of her super fans. I gave this book 3 stars. It was about a pilot who, you know, performs some sort of daring rescue and is therefore like a hero, and all the women want him, everyone wants him, and Olivia is the girl he ends up just, it's insta-love, it's like insta-lust, insta-love, and she just cannot trust that he's not going to go at it with the other women, even though he has been pretty clear and there are no really shady parts of why she couldn't believe him, like he's believable, and so that kind of irritated me. You know, if people are acting pretty believable and brushing off the women and not, you know, ogling boobs and things like that, then you kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt or let them go, like, if you can't trust them at some point. And so this book didn't quite really work for me. I read a couple books for my Curious Adventures nonfiction reading challenge. Yay! One of them being Paperback Crush, the totally radical history of 80s and 90s teen fiction. This was a trip down memory lane for me, that's for sure, and was delightful. It is by Gabrielle Moss. She sets it up, you know, love, friends, family, school, jobs, danger, terror, and talks about the books in that fit each of those, and the good, the bad, the ugly. And it was really nice to see, you know, even some more on the middle grade range being thrown in here, and at times she even threw out some really, really old books of where the first known history of this sort of young adult sort of literature could have come from. So it was a very, very fun book. Some of these I'd never heard of before, and then some pictures I was like, oh my goodness, I had that book on my shelf. So this was good. This was fun. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it for people who aren't familiar with this sort of history, but if you want a nostalgic feel and you know you were well versed in this kind of literature, Goosebumps and all of that, then this might be a fun flip through for you. I also read a graphic nonfiction, graphic novel, not like graphic. I grabbed El Deafo by C.C. Bell from the library. I just happened to see it on Hoopla because my library finally got Hoopla because they're still not open yet. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. And this is a middle grade, and it's a, you know, like a known voice. I mean, the author also had hearing loss. It's about a girl who gets, I believe, meningitis and loses her hearing, most of her hearing, and how it is growing up and going to school and adapting to all of that with this disability. I hate to call it disability because people would be offended by that, of course, but with those circumstances. And at the end of the book, she talks about, just very briefly, because it is for middle grade, you know, that there are different levels of deafness, and, you know, hers, she can hear a little bit of something, up to complete acute deafness, and some of the things that they do about it, and, but it's this was profound to me, to be honest. This was a must read. I feel like people should read this book. In schools, adults, it doesn't matter, because this just brought so many things to my attention, and to hear it from someone who's experiencing it is so much more profound than reading it in a science journal or something like that. So highly recommend. I gave this 5 stars. Everyone should grab this at some point and give it a read. And lastly, I actually just finished this not too long ago. I read The Wild Girl, The Notebooks of Ned Giles, 1932, by Jim Fergus. I don't even know where to start about this book. My mother has been nagging me to read this book for a couple years now, and boy is he a good writer. Let's just say that. This book starts with an old man who doesn't really want to go, but he needs some money, and he's selling his artwork, and there's this one picture of this Apache girl that people want to buy. It's super duper famous, and he just can't do it. And then you go into his story of being orphaned and joining an expedition of Americans going into Mexico to find a captured Mexican boy from the Apaches, and it is based on historical fact, but with these characters, and let me tell you, if you are into the whole Indian thing, I would say, the captured by Indians, the, Native American history in any sort of way, I would definitely recommend this book to you. And of course, this hit in a different way because, of course, my husband is Apache descent, and when I read about this wild girl, I saw my daughter, and so it was very profound for me on maybe a different level than other people, but very bittersweet, makes you think a little bit, and just like very interesting, and not something that I generally like. I am not a Native American lover. I'm not one of those who goes out and finds those books like my mother is, but I'm very glad I read this. And if it's something you're interested in, would love to talk to you about it because boy oh boy was this interesting. And that is that. I think that ended up going up a little bit longer than I anticipated, but that's what I've read the past couple months, some of it anyway, and my reading is definitely picking up a bit. I am thoroughly enjoying audiobooks for some reason, and I am deeply enmeshed in this Read the Olympics, because the Olympics are supposed to be on. But I will be talking to you later with some new stuff, and I hope you're reading something wonderful. And if you have any comments about the things that I've read, please let me know, and I will talk to you later. Bye.